Asa shalom, shalom aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael, v'yimeru, amen. This week's Torah portion, in addition to our regular reading that we read every week, we have the third of four special readings that we have in the days before and after Purim and leading into Passover. Before Purim, we had two readings: the reading of the Shkolim, about the holy shekels that were given in the temple and earlier in the tabernacle as a means of counting a census. Last week we read Zachor from Deuteronomy 25 to discuss the war with Amalek. And this week we'll read Parshas Parah, the reading from Book of Numbers, chapter 19, concerning the Parah Aduma, the red heifer, and then following that we have HaChodesh, which prepares us for Passover. Now, Parah is also in preparation for Passover, essentially, meaning that we read Parah because part of the purification ritual before entering the temple, which everyone had to do to go to partake of the Paschal Lamb, was to be sprinkled. It was a 7-day process, and the third day and the seventh day, including the regular things of immersing in the mikveh and so forth, was that they would be sprinkled with the ashes of the Parah Aduma, and that removes the impurity of contact with the dead. If we're in contact with a dead body, or visit a cemetery, or even in the same under the same roof as a dead body, the person becomes defiled by that contact, and therefore could not enter the temple. This level of impurity is believed that all Jews have today, because even if you visit a cemetery or whatever, and so therefore we are not even allowed to visit the parts of the Temple Mount where the temple stood. And since we don't exactly know where that is, many people are careful not to visit the Temple Mount at all, although most likely you are allowed to visit the periphery areas, but it's still better to be strict, yeah.
Are there people that suffer from leprosy at that time, like Daniel and stuff, and were cured by some miracle?
Yeah, so biblical leprosy, which we're going to talk about in a couple of weeks, is not Hansen's disease that is called leprosy today. Biblical leprosy, it's interesting because at one time I would see Bible commentaries in English that would explain that biblical leprosy, what's mentioned in the book of Leviticus, is not the leprosy we know today, because biblical leprosy was curable and modern leprosy is not. Nowadays they found a cure for leprosy, so it is curable. So science has advanced, perhaps gotten back to that original way, but what the Bible calls tsaras, which is translated often as leprosy, is a different type of skin condition. It doesn't really even resemble the Hansen's disease yet.
Some people suffer from stigmata. It's almost like they need an exorcism or something like that. Could something really happen? I heard the priest that it can happen, like lesions, like cuts that don't heal and stuff like that. And the person is all full of them. He has the devil inside of him. A priest has to perform an exorcism, a Catholic priest, an exorcism.
I mean,
stigmata.
Psychology is a very powerful thing. Scientists have said, for example, I remember reading a book. It was a book written in the 40s on the subject of hypnotism. And they said, I'm going to present you this knife and pierce you with it. And what they gave them was the rubber end of the pencil, the eraser and the pencil, and put it on their hand. And under a hypnotic state, the person started bleeding, because he really believed that this was a sharp knife, and his mind caused his skin to open up.
So susceptible.
So psychology can create manifestations like you described, like the stigmata, and it could be scientifically totally psychological and not spiritual at all. Personally, I believe that psychology and spirituality are linked. The reason I say that from a scientific standpoint would be Carl Jung was one of the great psychologists in the early 20th century. He was from Germany. He wasn't Jewish. He was German. He was not Jewish, but he studied a lot of Jewish mysticism and other religions as well. He was a very interesting fellow, Carl Jung, very brilliant scientist. And Jung said that he interviewed people of different cultures, different religions, all throughout the world with mental illness. And he found that they all were experiencing many things that were very similar. And so what Jung referred to that, I remember hearing this from Rabbi Bart Sadok, who lives in Tennessee. His website, koshertorah.com. So Jung says that from there we see there is a collective subconscious, meaning that human beings, meaning they came from different cultures, so there's no reason why they should experience things that were the same. Meaning, if you want to say this is a cultural thing that went into the mind and it's just a chemical reaction in the mind, why would people in totally different cultures have the same supernatural experiences? And so psychological experiences. So what he called it was a collective subconscious. So what does that mean, the collective subconscious? There's different ways, different possibilities. First, his scientific research could just be bunk. Maybe he didn't prove it scientifically. That's a possibility, and science is always open to interpretation and arguments. That's one possibility, although this has been observed and repeatedly observed throughout the world. So in general, that should be something that's accepted, even though the thing is that opens up to the possibility that supernatural worlds exist and supernatural realities exist, which would feel uncomfortable to many scientists, but really they shouldn't be uncomfortable with it because they're seeing that it is actually natural, is actually normal, is actually part of the world that exists. So hold on. So that's one possibility, is that his findings are wrong. Either people lied to him or he read into it what he wanted to see. That's a possibility. And that second possibility could say is an evolutionary possibility. What does that mean? Meaning to take out any spirituality from this phenomenon of the collective subconscious that Jung reported recognizing would be as follows: that somehow within the psyche, within our DNA, there are collective memories that we all share. There are other things like this. For example, there's a particular face, a kind of strange stylized face with a big smile, that all over the world people have said they've seen this face in dreams. I don't remember ever seeing it, but there's a phenomenon that's been studied around the world of things like this, that it's been studied from a psychological level of not seeing your own face, that everybody is seeing, that thousands, millions of people around the world are seeing the same type of kind of cartoon-looking face. It's kind of a scary-looking face, but no, in the dream. So, but why are people around the world, in China and South America and Africa and Canada, all dreaming the same face? That's the question. So hold on. So that's another example of this collective subconscious that Jung spoke about. Now, to go on further from that, was that scientific, so a possibility to explain this collective subconscious is that from an evolutionary standpoint, to say that people share these memories and that these were passed on in DNA, and that so there were that it is chemicals inside of us. The problem with that is, first of all, that sounds very much Lamarckian. There's the Lamarckian approach to evolution that has been, I think, completely debunked, and it doesn't even make sense scientifically. The Lamarckian approach to evolution would say that if, I mean, this is oversimplifying, and everybody knows this is not true. But that if you cut off someone's arm, then they parent a child, the child will be born with only one arm, which of course we know is not true, because that's. But that was lack of theory. The same thing. How would it be that these memories could be passed on through the DNA genetically? Hold on, it doesn't make sense scientifically. A possibility, though, is that these are certain primal urges that people who survived and that they were fit to survive because of these primal urges. That's maybe more of a Darwinian approach to why there's this collective subconscious. To say that it's all shared because people who had this, for some reason, were more fit to survive under Darwin's theory. Now, the third possibility, which I think is true, being a man of faith, is that this collective subconscious that people experience all throughout the world is tapping into an actual reality that exists beyond our physical bodies. There are spiritual worlds, there are spiritual beings, there are angels and demons and all kinds of creatures that God created that do not fit into what science currently understands, but eventually, as Jung is demonstrating here, and as in the field of psychology, but also as other scientists have demonstrated in the field of quantum physics, that there exists, if you want to take away the spiritual religious language and use a more scientific sounding language, you could say that there are other dimensions, and that, you know, there are energy beings, there are thought beings, there are spiritual beings, transdimensional beings, multidimensional beings, extraterrestrial, aliens, whatever you want to call them, and using these science fiction type of terms could explain, and they could actually just be using different words, using a different language to express the same thing that has been experienced and described in other ways in other literature. You know, if you look at the in the Islamic culture, and really it's also in pre-Islamic Arabic culture, there's the belief in the jinn. That's where the English word genie comes from. And the jinn are beings that Islamic and Arabic culture and mythology describe as being very powerful creations that God created, but they have their own societies. And the Jewish description in the Kabbalah, and not all Jews subscribe to the ideas of Kabbalah, but those who have in their teachings their different versions of Jewish demonology and angelology. The Jewish demonology differs very much from the traditional Christian demonology, although it's probably closer to the expressions of demonology that you'll find in Christian scripture, but you have to look at it in a non-traditional way, which is something really I want to talk about in a general way in this sermon. But a demon is not a denizen of hell, controlled by Satan. The Jewish approach to Satan, the biblical approach to Satan, is that Satan is just one of the angels. It's not, and he has a very tough job, but he's not an enemy of God. He's perhaps an adversary of man, and for good reason, because we can overcome, we can get stronger by fighting him, and our purpose is to fight. But hold on. But also, he's an accusing angel. We see that in the book of Job. That's in the Bible. How he was accusing. He's telling God, "Look at Job. He's only good because he has everything good. But if you took away his material prosperity, he wouldn't be so righteous and holy anymore." And so, therefore, in a sense, Although when I was a prison chaplain, I think a lot of people understood why a prosecuting attorney would be an archetype for the devil, for Satan. But that's a separate issue. But what I'm saying is that Jung's description of the collective subconscious can be understood, and I think that's how he understood it himself, and how people of faith can understand it, and people understand quantum physics can understand it, to be a connection to the spiritual world, that human beings live in different dimensions, essentially, and have access to other dimensions. We might not have the discernment, though, to know the difference between an angel and a demon. Meaning a demon might not be essentially evil, but generally, like the Muslim prototype of the jinn, is very, meaning jinn can be tricky people, even if they're not, or tricky beings. They're not people, they're spiritual beings, but they're not necessarily good or evil. They just are, just like in human society. You have some people who are bandits, some people who are robbers, some people who are extortionists. So too in the spiritual worlds, you have it seems that they have whole societies. You know, the Zohar, the book of Jewish mysticism, talks about demons of different religions, and actually the Muslim tradition of the jinn also says that jinn practice various religions, the same religions we practice on earth. They practice various religions. It's very similar type of ideas that we see among the different, in different traditions. You find these different traditions are expressing themselves in different ways and finding a lot of similarities. So therefore, there is this existence of a spiritual world. You asked about leprosy. So there were lepers who were cured in the Bible. Naaman was a very famous case, and there were other. Miriam had leprosy for 7 days and then was cured. And leprosy was one of those other things that declared a person unclean. Yeah, and the person would be declared unclean for having this condition. And the rabbis understood it, really based on what we even see with the story with Miriam, was that this was people were afflicted with leprosy for spiritual reasons. That meaning to correct their sins, they would be afflicted with this malady. Again, it's not the leprosy we have today, but it was a skin condition. And what it had to be was a priest had to come, a Kohen, a Jewish priest had to come and look at the skin condition. Now, so when you mentioned these phenomena that we have today, people starting to bleed and so forth, so it's very possible that there could be a spiritual component to mental illness and to psychology as well. That meaning our brain is basically the antenna that we have, the apparatus that we have to communicate with other worlds. And this is nothing strange. People do it all the time. People are constantly being bombarded with messages from spiritual worlds. The thing is that the spiritual worlds are so numerous and populous that God created that you don't know what you're seeing, and you could very well think, wow, I'm in some amazing place and you're really nowhere special. Doesn't mean it's your imagination. You're somewhere that's very real that God created. But it doesn't mean that it's not, it doesn't mean it's a figment of your imagination. But what it means is that what you're experiencing is not necessarily holy or good, meaning that there's a story that Rabbi Bar Tzadok told that I like to share. It's from the Sefer Minchas Eliyahu, from the author of the Shevet Musar. He was a rabbi in Izmir, Turkey, some 200 years ago, 220 years ago, thereabouts. And he tells the story that the man came to him and he said, I'm experiencing visions of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Gabriel. And they only tell me good things. They never told me anything wrong, that I should suspect that they are not who they claim to be. However, I know myself, I'm not holy enough to be worthy to these type of revelations. And so he was asking the rabbi, what do you think about this? What is your take on this experience I'm having? Now, unfortunately, today most rabbis wouldn't know, or most clergy or doctors wouldn't have the discernment to answer in the brilliant way that Rabbi Eliyahu Cohen, maybe it's Minchas Cohen or Minchas Eliyahu, I don't remember the name of the sefer, but he wrote the Shevet Musar also. His name was Rabbi Eliyahu Cohen, and he said he had discernment to ask the right question. He said, next time you see Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, ask them, are you the Avos HaOlam? Are you the patriarchs of the world? Are you the great patriarchs from the Bible, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Or are you just three guys who got together, were trying to fool me, and you're not lying to me, because your name's Abraham, your name's Isaac, your name's Jacob, and you would just assume that if you get together and present yourselves with these names, that I would accept that that's who you are. Actually, it's not the same thing, because we give those names, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I have a son Abraham. My Jewish name is Yitzchak, which is translated Isaac, and my English name is Joseph, whatever that is, but that it happens. Sometimes people have different English names and Hebrew names. I remember I was a rabbi out of town for a number of years, and there was another rabbi in town, and his English name was Daniel, and his Hebrew name was Aaron Tzvi, and people would call him Rabbi Daniel, and he wasn't really correct. The same thing, people call me Yosef, and that's not my name. My English name's Joseph, and he would also use his English name Daniel, and not Aaron Tzvi. When he got called to the Torah, it was Harav Aaron Tzvi, Ben Harav, whatever. But anyway, the same thing. I'm Yitzchak Zev, whatever. Same thing. Gabriel's a name that we give. Gabe Kaplan, from Welcome Back, Kotter. So the same thing. They're presenting these demonic figures, presenting themselves in a very holy way, just in order to trick this person. So when he asked Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, "Are you Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the patriarchs of the world? Or are you just three guys who are trying to trick me?" After that, they just they stopped bothering him. Hold on, but Gabriel kept bothering this fellow, and then he went back to the Shevet Musar, and the Shevet Musar gave him an amulet, and he said, "This will protect you from this being calling himself Gabriel," and it wasn't the real Gabriel. And that's what happens throughout history. People think, "Oh, I met this angel." How do you really know it's an angel? How do you know the difference between an angel and a demon? How do you know the difference between all these different things? So just because they tell you something, even they tell you good things, doesn't mean it's necessarily real. Yeah, but the thing is,
I had an amulet.
Yeah.
It says Solomon had it, and they engraved.
Right. So that's the point.
That was probably witchcraft.
Yes and no, not necessarily.
I had a book that comes with it, talk about witchcraft.
Yeah. So anyway, but all of these things are psychological also, and the psychology is not just in your mind. You're tapping into things that are much bigger than psychology, but they're also not that big. They're also not that special. You're not experiencing prophecy like the prophets of the Bible who experience prophecy just because you're communicating with the angel, but especially communicating with earth spirits, different types of spirits and things that try to trick people, try to fool people, and present themselves as something that they really aren't. And so that's something that is a problem throughout the world. But yet, it's an experience of something that's very real, and it's not just figments of their imagination. Now, back to this, and back to what I was saying about the red heifer. A very interesting law about the red heifer. A historical thing. We're just about done. And history, in the times of the Second Temple, this is a little complicated, so pay attention. They would say there was two parties, very different parties in the Jewish people in the Second Temple times. And two of the biggest parties were the Sadducees and what are often called the Pharisees, or the scribes. And generally the scribes and the Pharisees were similar, not necessarily the same, but similar. The rabbis, they're not exactly the same, and there are many different subgroups in these, even among it's called the Pharisees. The Talmud itself, people say that the Talmud was written by the Pharisees, but like Rabbi Bartzanov points out, that the Talmud says there were 10 different groups of Pharisees, and only one were authentic, and the rest were hypocrites or trying to fool people. And so there were many different groups that existed in ancient times. But in essence, still, the ideology that the Pharisees followed was that they followed the rabbis. And although not all rabbis would call themselves Pharisees, the word Pharisee in Hebrew is prushim. That means people who separate from the world. They were abstinent. They abstained from certain things in the world. But there were certain people who were foolishly abstinent, and there were different things like that. So in any event, but there were also the sincere abstainers. So in any event, let's just finish this, and then we could say Kaddish at the end of it. So then there were the vast majority, the common people who were true to the traditions of Moses and followed the teachings of the rabbis. And then you had